Hey everybody, and welcome to Politics, Culture and Some Other Shit. And I'm very excited to talk to my guest today. Is a gentleman called Paddy Fox. Paddy is a member of Mid-Ulster families who deal with families that have been killed by the UVF in North Armagh and East Tyrone since 1988. Rather heavy. And my interest in talking to Paddy is in with regards to the collusion that's coming to light more and more as the days, weeks, and months go on. It's kind of blowing my mind, taking me quite by surprise. And Paddy is also an ex-Republican prisoner, so we're going to talk about all of that. So, welcome to the podcast, Paddy.
How are you? How's everyone?
All good. Listen, thanks so much for agreeing to do this. It's an absolutely horrifying and fascinating subject, but I think it's important that we have the people like you talk about this stuff, saying as you were so affected by it.
Well, I suppose basically, I'm part of the group called Mid-Ulster Families. We represent 50 families who've had people, men, women, and children, who've had people killed by the UVF between 88 and 88 and 1996. And as I go on, I'll tell you that it's mostly the same people, the same gang, the same people, and the same weapons that are used. So that's the link. There's a diagram called the spider's web diagram, and right in the heart of it would be 3 or 4 people, and you can see where the weapons are moved all over Mid-Ulster, basically, to do.
Do you have that diagram?
I have it. I can send it to you.
Would you please?
One that was actually, there's a crowd called the Historical Inquiries Team who looked at a lot of the killings, who reviewed them. Now, to be honest, there weren't much cop. It just went over old RUC files, and if the RUC didn't find it, they certainly didn't. But they actually emailed it to our solicitor by mistake, the spider's diagram, and it's now a basis of civil cases, because they never let on to us about all these links. As far as they're concerned, all the shootings were at random and done by different people. So, like, they knew the HET's remit at the start, I think, was probably to cover up a lot of the police inadequacies and the collusion.
So, what is your what are your goals within this group that you're talking?
Well, listen, we're not looking anybody to go to jail. It's too late for that, right? Yeah. Mostly just truth and honesty. You know, the state have an obligation to protect its people. If what happened in Mid-Ulster happened in Surrey, there'd be riots in the street. Yeah, we're seen as the backwater, and sure, we're only Catholics, and that's it. You know. So
it's as simple as that. It boils down to that, doesn't it? Really?
Yeah, like we're just saying, like if we're supposed to be protected by the state, they set up groups within the state to kill our state members. Like, they have to be held accountable. They can't. Yeah. The government, I guess, stops at. It runs as far as Whitehall, as far as we're concerned. Yeah. I'll start from the beginning. So what's the easiest way? Yeah. My parents were Charlie and Tess Fox, and they were shot by the Loyalists in September 1992. Prior to that, my brother-in-law, Kevin McKierney, was shot in January 1992. So my sister lost her husband and her parents. At the time, it seemed random killing. We would be known as Republicans, but with a very small R. And the history of where I come from, I come from a road called Listamnet Road, and it's 12 houses. And then from 1972 to 1992, there's been 6 people shot on it, all Catholics. The road's half a mile long. So the more you would be in part of what's called the Murder Triangle. And at the heart of the triangle was Portadown, where the Loyalist stronghold, and they could feed out towards East Tyrone or towards North Armagh, towards Guildford. And if you look at all the killings from 72 on, they're all in around that area.
Yeah.
So that was their run back. So anyway, my parents were killed in 1992. The first person killed in Tyrone was 1988. Fella McNelly down, and the last one was killed was 1994. Kathleen O'Hagan. She was a pregnant woman, shot up in outside Gortin. She was pregnant at the time. They shot her in the stomach, so made sure the baby would die. Oh my God. So As we went on, it became increasingly clear that they were very good and got very good very quick, or they were getting state help. Because prior to '88, there was no killings in Mid Ulster for maybe 8 or 9 years. The Loyalists in Mid Ulster were finished after the Clifford McKeown Supergrass trial in the mid '80s. In 1985, '86, Billy Wright was a preacher, born again Christian, wasn't involved. So something along the way reactivated the Mid Ulster Loyalists, and I think it was a direct response to the state getting worried about the guns that Colonel Gaddafi had sent the IRA, and they had to counteract that because it took them by surprise. They had no idea the amount of, until the accident was caught, they had no idea the amount of guns that the IRA were importing.
Wow.
So they didn't. It's only, they came late to the game, and suddenly from 1987, the Loyalists went from maybe having a handful of guns in the whole of the north till they were getting in automatic rifles or getting in rocket launchers, something they never had before, and that doesn't happen by accident. But
the it's known that Loyalists were colluding way before that.
Oh, absolutely. This starts with Billy Hanna in 1971 was the UVF leader in Mid Ulster, and he was an old school UVF man. His role had been action against Republicans rather than civilians. Right. And he took Robin Jackson under his wing, later called the Jackal. Yeah. And Jackson was working like I'm trying to work this out. What year it was he killed? I mean, he ended up killing his OC, shot him in front of his wife, basically, and took over. And from then they went purely sectarian. And it was to counteract what the IRA were doing, trying to drag the IRA into a sectarian war.
Yes.
You know, it's like from a Republican point of view.
Billy Wright has said that.
If you're not seen as defending your people, they're not going to let you in through their doors.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it would distract Republicans from the real target would be obviously the British. If you have to sort of start going after Loyalists as well, you know.
Yeah.
So it would have been Kitson would have you've heard of Frank Kitson. That'd have been his. You use the locals to shoot each other, you know.
Yes, of course, yeah.
So after Jackson killed Billy Hanna, he actually killed Billy Hanna in front of Billy Hanna's wife, and she refused to give evidence against him. So Jackson took over and became just mass. If you look at all the big bombings and the shootings of the 70s, that was Jackson. So it was. Now, what we found out through disclosure is Jackson was actually taken away and trained. So he was somewhere in Wales. So you can imagine it's probably, or near Wales. So I imagine it's some secret place anyway. And he came back and he recruited other likewise or like-minded Loyalists, but not as smart. Just he recruited killers basically. Yeah. And they became known as the Glenanne gang.
Yes.
And everything they did was the Dublin Monaghan bombings. It was 3 days before that the Dáil were going to have a vote on the new anti-terror laws in the south, and there was a lot of opposition to the new anti-terror laws. But when you have 31 people killed in Dublin, they went through no problem. You couldn't be seen not to have anti-terror laws, you know.
Yes.
And that doesn't happen. They're not that good. They're not that smart.
Yes.
So our thing would be that they were all along. It was they were being fed by a higher military intelligence, obviously.
Yeah.
It wasn't RUC. Like RUC would have had their informers, but not to the extent. They wouldn't be directing people. So the one whereas Jackson was being directed to do what he did. Mm-hmm. And if you look at his targets in this area, were all married couples. So there were within the Moy area itself. There's been 5 sets of married couples shot dead, and that terrorized people. That puts people, you know. If the IRA or Republicans can't be seen to defend them, and you know yourself, you said yourself, people couldn't sleep at night. What was going to happen next?
Well, how many people did I read correctly the other day? The Glenanne gang were responsible for the hundreds of murders.
Yeah, I think the about 180.
Aye.
About now, that's what they're directly involved in. Then there'll be indirect ones as well. But actually 180 were and Jackson. was
Sorry,
responsible
and
for maybe
those
35 actual shootings.
really he pulled the trigger as many
Oh
as
yeah, he was a
was
gunman,
that?
man.
Jesus. So, um, so those 180 murders that can be attributed directly to the Glenanne gang, we're talking about every one of those being as a direct result of collusion as well, right?
Yes, well, if it stands to reason,
It stands to reason, yeah.
if Jackson is an agent,
Yeah.
Jackson's not an informant. Jackson's an agent, so
Yeah.
he's been directed by someone, and they're saying this is who you go after. Now, I've no doubt they killed people for personal reasons too.
Oh, okay, yeah, of
You know,
course.
but like most of them would have been the likes of the Reevy brothers in South Armagh would have been direct, and our ones would have been just saying, right, be as dirty as you can, go into that house and kill everybody and put the fear of God in them. And
Yeah,
that's what it did.
yeah. And that's what you
Absolutely
did.
put the fear. Like,
You did that.
I can remember growing up here in the 70s, like around here, like, and we had shutters in your window at night and all, so they wouldn't see a chink of light coming out.
Yeah, I remember. Yeah, I remember the same myself. I was brought up here in Lurgan as well, of course, and then out in Craigavon for a bit in my teens, early teens, and that whole the Billy Wright mob were
So,
the
so if you come up to 1979, 1980, most of the Glenanne gang have either been arrested and caught or killed. So Jackson, at that's the Mid Ulster and the IRA had changed. They weren't as big of a threat to the state as they were in the early 70s or mid 70s. So they weren't needed as much. There was still the odd Catholic being killed, but Jackson at that stage, one, had a big crowd around him, and then, as I say, come the Anglo-Irish Agreement, come the IRA getting stuff in from Gaddafi from 86 on, the Brits had to reactivate Jackson. Now, at that stage, Jackson had cancer. So he wasn't as capable. Now, we've paperwork here where Jackson and Billy Wright were being stopped together in cars, in around Kappa and around, all the Republican areas. They've
So
been stopped.
when you say the British reactivated him, I mean, so would they have put him into retirement, so to
Well,
speak, for
yeah,
want of a better
let's say,
word, and then
listen,
literally get him back? Right, you need to go back out again.
absolutely, yeah. Or see what you can set up. And this is where the interesting bit comes in. He gets Wright, but Wright's a front man. Wright's not a gunman. Wright, I think, from what we're led to believe, Wright only ever shot one or two people.
Right.
So, but he was a good front man. He's a showman. So he was. And you need a bogeyman, so you do.
Yes.
But the actual triggerman, Wright wasn't the triggerman. They recruited two triggermen, so they did. One of them's a fellow called Alan Oliver. His name's been all over the paper, so it's no big secret.
I know who he is. Yeah.
He's prolific. Alan, what we're led to believe is Alan Oliver wasn't informed that he was an agent as well. So he is protected. He's protected by the state. And the same thing, the same type of killings that there were in the 70s, the likes of my parents would go in and shoot, go into the cairns, and shoot every male in the house. Old school stuff. The dirtier the better.
Wow.
And that again was to put pressure on Republicans. I can tell you now, when the ceasefire was called in '94, people in East Tyrone were begging for it. So they were, because they had the East Tyrone broke.
Yeah. Wow.
So that's our take on it. So what we have found out through discovery and through civil cases that I know this is going to sound mad, but they were being protected by the state and by other agencies. What I don't know if you remember Roseanne Mallon being killed. She was one of the last killed in 1994. She was an old lady. They shot her through the window. She was her two nephews would have done time for republicanism,
Yeah.
So they shot her through the window. And when her inquest came up 4 or 5 years ago, maybe 6 years ago, and at that stage, it was the forensics had said that the gun that was used to shoot Roseanne Mallon had never been used before, and it was recovered shortly afterwards, and people were happy enough with that. That was the forensics had said that. But in the Roseanne Mallon inquest, someone phoned the coroner, and now we reckon it's one of the HET team who weren't happy with what they had found out, to say no, that gun had been used to shoot 7 other people. So they got the Northern Ireland Forensic Lab in to explain the discrepancy. And they said, well, we didn't really handle that gun. There was a crowd called WORK. It's called the Weapon and Explosive Research Group or company, something like that. It's called WORK anyway. No one had ever heard of WORK before.
Yeah.
They were set up in 81. So after every shooting, they were first on the scene. So they took the bullet heads away and took the things away. Then they sent the report over to the Northern Ireland Forensic Lab and said, right, that was the gun that done it, and it was used here, there, and or it never been used before.
Yeah.
So the judge, Seamus Tracy, was the judge, and he says, "Who's this work?" No one heard him. So they got the head of work in, and they asked him about his credentials, and he said he had none. He's no forensic credentials, but he used to be a crane driver in Harland Wolff. That was his credentials.
Right.
So after, so what came out of that was, there was 2 rifles used in Tyrone and Mid Ulster. There were two. They killed 18 people.
Okay.
Prior to Roseanne Mallon, one gun had killed 17 people, and the last gun had shot Roseanne Mallon. But when they re-examined the forensics, it turned out that the gun that shot Roseanne Mallon had shot 9 people. So there was a reason why they didn't want that coming out. Mm-hmm. Because the gunman who shot Roseanne Mallon had also shot. The gun had been adapted. When they did recover it, they put a folding stock on it, and it had been adapted, what we think, for one particular man.
Oh.
So wow. It wasn't a normal. It wasn't. The butt had been taken off and had been a homemade butt. It was probably for concealing under a coat. But so we reckon that, going back, and if you look at the shootings, the likes of my parents and all, it was used in my parents. It's the same gunman.
That was. Oh my God! Right.
So that only came out in 2014. And prior to that, everybody in Tyrone, or anybody who got forensics back, had said, yeah, the one gun had shot 19 people, and this other gun only shot 1 person. But now it turns out it shot 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 11 people. So there's a reason for that. There's a reason for them hiding that. And work had doctored the forensics.
So can I ask a question, Paddy? Work, are they a member? Are they some subdivision of the army or the cops?
Yes. The army. They're military. They're attached to the military, which would say they're attached to military intelligence, MI5. You know what I mean?
So who's this character that used to be a crane driver in Harland Wolff? Was he the real head of the organisation?
No one knows. Absolutely, no one knows. I've the Roseanne Mallon papers here. I'll email you the bit he comes on and says about being a crane driver and stuff. It was mad stuff.
Wow.
So, may I
ask another question? The number of murders attributed to that gun, it seems to be increasing as more information comes out. Is that likely to rise?
Well, we don't know, because work have got around the fact that they say that. Now, when you hear this, that there are microscopes in 1988 to 94, when they were doing the forensics, weren't as good as modern day microscopes.
Okay.
Now they've been doing forensics on weapons from the 20s. Like,
yeah.
it doesn't like.
No, it doesn't.
One gun leaves a very distinctive mark on the bullet head. Anyway, that was he just stuck to the story, and that was it. So,
wow.
After that, prior to that, we never had an inquest for Mummy and Daddy because of this thing called the Coroner's Act, where if someone has been charged in connection with the killing, it negates the need for an inquest.
Right.
So it's called the Coroner's Act of Northern Ireland, blah blah, whatever it is. Anyway, it just means there was a fella charged in Mummy and Daddy's case. So we just were never allowed an inquest. But after that, because of the furore over the weapons, the 2 different guns, and they're mucking about, we got a message from the coroner to say that they were going to give us an inquest.
When was that?
That was about 3 months after the Roseanne Mallon inquest. We were surprised as anyone.
Yeah.
But now we know why. So, so we've had discovery from. We never did. Listen, to be honest, from a week after Mummy and Daddy were killed, we've heard nothing from the police. My sister got a phone call and no new updates. When people were charged or arrested, we never found out. They never told us. So we've been starting to get discovery. And on Kevin McKierney, my brother-in-law, who was killed earlier on in the year. And in the Kevin McKierney case, the gunman, the getaway car didn't burn out.
Right.
So it didn't. And there was the gunman's coat. He was wearing a distinctive parka. It was found laying in the front, unburnt. So it was bagged and tucked at Glenanne police station. And that night, it disappeared. That's not in dispute. HETs, everyone's saying that. They've no idea. Somebody walked into their forensic store, took it out, and gone.
Wow.
So
See, and that is I think we briefly spoke just in to be open and honest about things. Paddy and I had a brief 2-minute discussion before we pressed record on this. So this is all new, right, Paddy? We're not. This is this is an open and honest conversation that we're having.
oh yes,
But I said to you at the start that I would have been one of the people that maybe, I did. I would have said that. Of course, there was collusion. We know there was always collusion, but I would have maybe poo-pooed a little bit the amount of collusion that some people like you were claiming was going on. But as it's turned out, that that the amount of collusion that has been happening over half a century is just unbelievable. And we're only the government at the minute are actually changing the law in order to protect people who have been involved in this, right?
They're changing the law. There's going to be no more inquests. They're saying that they're unduly, or not. What's saying that it's mostly against, or prosecutions are mostly against soldiers, which is wrong. There's been more Republicans and Loyalists charged.
Yes.
So retrospectively, and I think there's only been two soldiers charged, and one of them's got off. Soldier F's got off. So, yes. But they're winding enough people up in England, and they have got all the ex-servicemen groups and all the ex-British soldiers. They're all happy enough with this, so they are, because they're thinking, fuck, they're coming for us next. So they're happy enough to and it'll not affect any Republicans, because if they could have charged Republicans, would have, and Loyalists too. If there's evidence there, they'll charge them.
Yes.
So, but they're getting wound up, so it'll go through the House of Commons, no problem. So there'll be no more amnesties.
It goes back to your point right at the very beginning, where you're saying, these people don't care about us over here. We are not a part of their. We're not a part of their thinking. We're not a part of what the politicians of the establishment interest. They don't care about what's going on about us here on this part of the island.
The Ballymurphy inquest scared the shit out of them, because so much came out. And Lord Justice Keegan, she ran it, and I think at the start, I remember talking to one of the solicitors who was over east. At the start, 160 of the soldiers said they weren't coming. They just weren't coming. At the end, only 3 hadn't come, and the reason they hadn't come is because they're not within the EU jurisdiction. There was arrest warrants issued. There was everything. There was actually a plane stopped, and one of them taken off the plane when he's flying over EU space.
Get away.
Yeah. Oh, listen, it scared the shit out of them, because an inquest now is probably the same now as a public inquiry. So much comes out.
Aye.
Prior to this, inquest in the North, all I could say was that Andy McGibbon was shot 3 times by a certain type of gun, and that's it. And you died off. They couldn't say anything else. They just wouldn't. The Coroner's Act wouldn't allow them to say anything else, because there were soldiers killing people left, right, and centre, ambushes and stuff, and they didn't want that coming out. So all the coroner could do, he was restricted into saying how they died.
Yeah. Oh, really?
So, yeah. Oh, yeah. All I could say was Mr. X, Mr. Y was shot 23 times, and he died from massive blood loss. They couldn't say murder. They couldn't say, because the early inquests in the 70s, some of them were obviously nationalist inquests, or there was nationalist majority in the juries. They were saying this fellow was more than the RUC. So they changed the law, as they do.
Yeah.
But after the Good Friday Agreement, they brought in that was for every inquest. That wasn't just controversial inquests. So anybody who died in a car crash, any what you'd call non-terrorist related deaths, were treated the same.
Oh.
So that was just to protect themselves. So after that, it was changed then in the mid-90s or late 90s that you could then call witnesses. You could do that. The families could call witnesses. Like, you remember, most inquests in the North prior to that the families hadn't got legal representation.
Yeah, yeah. And then that change in the law was able to be applied backwards?
Yes. That's,
And
yeah. So
is that because if new information come to light, then
no, it's retrospective. It's just the corners. The corner at the start they were very reticent to change anything, right? Because John Mackey and stuff, a good enough man as he was, he didn't know how to apply it because he'd been used to applying the old rules all the time.
Oh right, yes.
But then these new tranche of inquests, they're judge led, so they are and coroner led. So a
Right.
judge would have more, and most of the judges used to be barristers themselves, so they'd know the crack.
Yes.
So Siobhan Keegan, the Justice Keegan, she in Ballymurphy, she knew exactly from the start what way it was going to go, or what way she wanted it ran. And the state tried to do it the old way, and she went, no, that's not the way it works, you know.
Oh,
And
really?
Ballymurphy scared the shit out of them.
Really?
Absolutely. Look at the with not very little inquest, or very little information, but with not much proof. She was fit to say, they never got a soldier to say, yeah, I actually shot someone.
Yeah.
But the facts were there, the bullet cases were there, they did. So she never got anybody in. She never got anybody to admit it. But she just surmised. She just said, yeah, that's what they done.
Yeah.
So
Wow.
if you start to apply that to more recent cases, where now disclosure in the inquest is unreal. It's as good as a public inquiry, I'm telling you.
Right. So what way does that work now?
Well, what do is thing called non-sensitive first. So that's just basically the police on the day, what happened, and then the sensitive stuff that'll be redacted, but it'll just say it'll say was there a police operation if the records exist, and the one thing about the British do, they love keeping records.
Yeah.
So they do. So
Renowned for it.
so everything so. You can apply to. There's a place up in Leeds. It's an old coal mine. I can't remember the name of it, but all their records are stored in an old coal mine underground. So they are.
Okay.
So you can apply everything to do with the Fox case, and even if it's sensitive, you might get a page and there could be one line on it. But you can surmise. You go and go, well, hang on. Colonel F has what's he interested in the Fox case for? You know what I mean?
Yes. Yes.
So it's more how wide it goes. And there's a crowd from Belfast, and I can't remember his name. His grandmother was killed in McGork's. It's called Paper Trail Northern Ireland, and they know exactly what they ask for. So they do.
Right.
So
I'll put a wee link in the show notes.
So and they're very good. This is trial and error. They've perfected this over years, so they now know what you could ask for. Used to be you had to know what the case file was called, or the number of it. But there's ways around it now, and it's just as I say, as solicitors get more aware of how to get things. Like this is new to them too. For years there was nothing ever coming out. You could ask. Well, I guess my sister Bernie has been trying to get her inquest is ongoing from 1996, and the paperwork only came through there. I'm sitting looking at it. Maybe
26 years.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, every month we were going down, and this crowd were saying they couldn't find this and they couldn't find that, and the judges weren't pushing them. Or sorry, the coroner. It was a coroner at that stage. He wasn't pushing them. He just accepted we can't find that or whatever. Because you got to remember in 97, 98, most of the files in Mid-Ulster were held in Gough Barracks.
Yeah.
And in a shed apparently outside. And a contractor came in and said there was asbestos and everything had to be destroyed. Oh. And the building contractor was asked to survey this shed, and he said there's asbestos on the roof. Everything in this store had to be destroyed. Do you know who the contractor was?
Oh God.
David Jameson, the UVF commander in Mid-Ulster. I'm not joking.
Kidding?
No, the Jamesons. And we also, I know, here's no antidote, but the Jamesons. I was talking to a fellow one night. I'm not going to say who he was, but he was a Protestant fellow, but he had a family member killed by the UVF, and he knew everything about them. He actually used to work for the Jamesons, and he said there's a thing called the Rumble House. It's where the police learn how to search houses.
Right.
Where to look, where not to look, blah, blah. The Jamesons actually constructed the Rumble House for the police. Really? So it's basically how to search a house, you know?
Yeah, yeah.
So they could say, like, I mean, you sort of, the policemen are robots. They're told, you're taught how to do it, and you go in and do it. The Jamesons knew, like, where they're going to be looking.
Yeah.
So that's anyway. So most of the interview notes from Goth Barracks were destroyed. So they were, because they were covered in asbestos, allegedly. Now, no one's seen it. We've asked for copies of this asbestos report. Nobody's seen it, you know. So any interview notes from 88 till 90 were suspects who were then questioned, and how they were questioned, they're gone. So that's one tranche of it. But when someone is convicted of the likes of Tom Harper, who was convicted of shooting the three over in the wee sweetie shop, do you remember them?
Craigavon?
Young Gerald Duffy, yeah.
Oh, yeah, Katrina Rennie.
There was a fella called Tom Harper who was the getaway driver.
A mate of mine was in that shop. He survived it.
Jesus Christ!
A very, very dear friend of mine was actually his mother. I could tell you that story. I'll tell you it some other time. Go ahead.
Well, Tom Harper was convicted of that, and so his papers then become part of Pony Public Records Office in Northern Ireland, right? So when you're convicted, your interview notes and all are then moved from, obviously, or transcribed from Goth Barracks onto your depositions, and then they're stored.
Yeah.
And so you have access to them. Well, you should have access to them, but they won't give us access to them. So we only know what Tom Harper actually said in the barracks from his appeal. We got his appeal papers, and he has Alan Oliver all over it. So he has, and it's no big secret because it's in the public domain. Yeah. Where Tom Harper actually didn't know he was driving. That's why Tom Harper, I say, confessed. He didn't know what was happening that night. He thought they were going to shoot the owner of the shop, who was an ex-prisoner. Yes. And Oliver, who's well known as a gunman, just went in and the same thing, be as dirty as you can. Yeah. And it sends a message.
I'll tell you what, it fucking
But does. It sends a message that no one is immune. That they're not just coming after Republicans, they're coming after anyone, and it could be you next.
It'd be your children.
It could be, exactly. Well, God love them. I'm very friendly with the McShane's. Their son was shot in the taxi office in Armagh, Gavin, in a school uniform. Yeah. And again, Oliver's the suspect in that because the police actually give them. I'll tell you the story in a minute. But anyway, Oliver went in, and there was two. There was a man and a woman behind the counter who were in their 30s. But he went for the two young lads. He fired 5 shots, and all 5 shots hit. So that's someone who's fired a gun before. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So
and he's now a minister over in Portadown now, isn't he?
He is. Yeah, he's part of that Elm Church.
Elm, yeah.
Well, after Gavin McShane's, his mother died there a couple of weeks ago. She actually survived a bombing in the 70s when she was pregnant with him in a bar in Katy. She lost an eye, and she was pregnant. She always called him the Wonder Child, you know?
Yeah.
And then he was shot when he was, 16 or 17, you know? But anyway, after the inquest, the perfunctory inquest that they had, and it was after the ceasefire, it must be 94, 95, the head of the RUC in Armagh was at the court, and he wasn't happy. He apparently wasn't the worst. He said to the family, do you want to know? They had no idea who shot their son. They said, do you want to know who shot your son? And they said, yeah. And he showed them a photograph of Oliver, a black and white mugshot.
Yeah.
He said, that's the man there. And they went, fuck, can we have this? He says, call over tomorrow and I'll get you a photograph, a colour one. So they have the photograph with the RUC stamp on the back, official photograph. Now, your man, I think he was born, I think he's dead now. So he'll not stand over that, but he actually put him there and then, you know. And he just said, what he said is, they can't touch him.
They can't touch him? That's obviously suspicious in and of itself.
But at that stage, people sort of were working out, you know, more to this meets the eye.
Yeah.
You got to remember, like, Special Branch would have been subservient, or the RUC had been subservient to the branch, who's subservient to MI5, you know, or
of course,
intelligence.
Of course.
In my brother-in-law's case, Kevin McKierney, he was shot on the 2nd of January, and we've got disclosure there, and it said on the 30th of December, all police and military were told to stay out of the Moy, that the special branch were conducting an operation. And a fella called Frank Cure, he's dead now, he's over the special branch. And so they were kept out, but on the 30th, or 31st, sorry, it was New Year's Eve, there was a fella noticed a fella wearing a parka jacket looking through the window of the butcher shop where my brother was shot. So what we reckon is they were told they were letting whoever shot Kevin in to get a look at him first and to make sure that they weren't being hampered. Because it wasn't an attempt, because the getaway car wasn't bought till the night before the shooting, so it wasn't as if the branch knew that the shooting was going down that day.
Right.
And it was I can't remember the name of the notice, but it's off limits to security forces basically for 3 hours. So we reckon he was dropped off. Have a look through the window, make sure you get the right person. I know, and then come back 2 days later and you know who you're going for. It only makes sense because it wasn't against Republicans.
Yes.
So why would you send them off 3 days before?
Isn't that what Billy Wright is on record as saying that they're just going to kill Catholics because it will put the fear of God into everybody, into them. And
again, we think it's part of their ploy. Like at that stage in most the late 80s and early 90s, the two strongest areas of republicanism would have been East Tyrone and South Armagh. And how do you control East Tyrone? You send the loyalists in. South Armagh is different. They built watchtowers and stuff, and they restricted them. But this is all part of a policy. Well, that's what we believe. It's an anti-IRA policy, but you use the loyalists to do it.
Yes, and the casualty is the civilian population.
Absolutely, there's no point shooting IRA men because people go, well, he sort of deserved it, And if I'm not an IRA man, then they're not going to come for me. But if you're standing on a sweetie shop and you're shot dead, you go, fuck me, could be me the next time. Sorry for cursing.
No, please curse away. This is yep.
So anyway, as what we have found out over the last 15 years is that the bigger, as I say, the spider's web that they call it, it's the same people. Like you. In mid-Ulster at any one time, there might be more than a dozen UVF men.
Right.
So we have a fella called Vicky Yatti. He was an Indian fella. He was actually convicted of moving the gun that shot my brother-in-law. But he's living in a loyalist part of Portadown, and he was moving their guns for them. So basically, they're throwing him into a taxi, and he's moving from A, B, C, and D. And we have access to his papers, or some of his papers, and he reported directly to Alan Oliver, not to Billy Wright.
Right.
So he did. But Billy Wright came in one night and asked him to move the gun, and he wouldn't do it for him. Not out of fear, but because he didn't work for him. Simple as that.
Wow.
And now, in between time, you got to remember the ordinary RUC, some of them have been decent enough, were still trying to solve crimes.
Aye.
So there were, but you have cases where the likes of, like, we can only work on ciphers, suspect A, B, C, and D, but you can work out, in your own head. Some of them are held for the likes of Heister for killing 3 people. Some of them are held 4 hours and released.
Yeah.
Like, anything we ever lifted was 5 days at least.
Yeah.
So it was to show, it was tokenism to show that they're arresting people. The likes of Tom Harper was arrested on a sting that had nothing to do with the UVF, but when he was arrested, he was caught blackmailing someone, and he admitted everything then. But it was by chance he pled guilty, or by chance he was arrested.
So in your opinion, the handlers, pardon me, the handlers of the Loyalists were the higher-ups in MI5, or agents of MI5, filtering through special branch, infiltrating certain areas of the RUC, and then controlling the Loyalists that way, or feeding the Loyalists with what they wanted that way?
No, I'd say in Mid-Ulster was a bigger operation. I'd say in Mid-Ulster they were feeding it through their agents on the ground. I'd say the likes of Oliver and stuff are getting their orders direct.
From special branch?
No, from military intelligence. It had been on the ground, like.
Oh, fuck me.
Because I know in the 70s, Billy Hanna's wife had said that her husband every week had army officers in the house. And I think Hannah wouldn't go along with, up on the scale, to mass civilian deaths, and that's why Jackson shot him and took over.
Oh, fuck.
Now, I'm telling you, he shot right in front of his wife. Now, she'd never say it was him, but it's well known. And as I said, by all sorts, Hannah was an old school UVF man, the Gusty Spence type. That
yes.
type,
Yeah.
Whereas they're looking something, they're looking like they're in the 70s was on the edge of a civil war at one stage.
Yes. So they were trying to up the ante.
They were trying to up the ante and to see it worldwide that it was a sectarian war, Catholics killing Protestants. That's the myth. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
The IRA didn't want to be dragged into that sort of stuff. Republicans didn't, be dragged into that. The war dragged into it, don't get me wrong, there was some horrible things done. But by and large, they tried not to.
Yeah.
It's even dirtier, than even those of us that lived through it. It's even dirtier than we know.
Well, I know this came from a HET fella, because we talked to the HET, and he said that Glenanne was a mess, he says, but Middle Ulster, which he told me, 88 on, he says, was a complete sewer.
Yeah.
And that's why the HET was closed down very quick. Said they ran out of money and stuff. And even the reports we got, they were perfunctory, but I think it just got, they realised, as I say, by the spider's web diagram, they said, this isn't. You've got, remember, there's an English policeman coming over, and he has no idea of the ways of the North. Because they're all, Dave Cox and all were all seconded from their police forces. As he was over the HET, and they were coming over and thinking, well, that gun was used to shoot him. They probably thought it was a different person all the time. They didn't realise how, when they got into it, and as I said, they actually done a thing called the spider's web, and they went, fucking hell, this is a very small group of people doing everything.
So what would be the difference then? I know that, Belfast UDA, there was quite a few of them. I mean, there was a lot of them.
Aye, but they were all special branch agents. That's the difference.
The
next one was William Stobie and all. They were special. Now, it could have been run differently in Belfast if it wasn't Tyrone, but we were, I forgot to tell you, a lot of the shootings in what we called them the Loch Shore in Tyrone, around Arboe, they're all done by UVF men. Now, there's still the same guns, but are not UVF, UDR men.
Yeah, yeah.
So it was. So they obviously would have been controlled by someone as well,
Oh, wow. Okay.
But it's the same guns. It's like, to bring the gun from Coke outside Cookstown to Portadown, it's 40 miles.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it's not...
and it's not something at that time that you would do if you thought you were going to get caught by the cops.
Exactly. But they still hadn't got... I don't know why they kept doing that. Did someone come close to a gun or whatever? I don't know, because there was plenty of guns about. It wasn't as if they hadn't... but it was the same 2-3 guns all the time.
Aye, that's interesting enough.
See, they hadn't got access to assault rifles before. They had Uzis and pistols and stuff, but they never had access to the AKs and stuff. And then when they're called DZ-58s, they're a Czech rifle.
Yeah.
They were actually destined for the PLO, and the Israelis got them and sold them to the South African arms dealer called Bernhardt. And then he sold them to Ulster Resistance. So it's a strange story too. No one can prove. They said it was funded by a bank robbery in Portadown in 1987, right? But if you go and check about the bank robbery, no one said it wasn't an armed robbery. It just said it was robbed. They didn't say how it was robbed.
Right.
No one knows to this day how it was robbed.
But it was robbed.
Well, they're saying it was robbed.
The money went missing.
The money went missing. Yeah, there's 300,000 went missing. So there was.
So somebody just walked. Oh, yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Listen, if you want something convenient to happen, Portadown's the place for it to happen.
Yeah.
So
unbelievable.
They were fit to bring those guns in that within 3 months.
Wow.
So they were, but they had the links established in '86 after the Anglo-Irish, but they had no money. Ulster Resistance had no money there, but then they tied in with the UVF and UDA, who ponied up the money. A joint operation to rob this bank.
Yeah.
Apparently.
Yeah.
And again, the UDA lost their guns near enough straight away. Davy Payne was caught with them outside Port Down.
Right.
Coming from a farm in Market Hill.
And caught by
The police, yeah. They lost their share of their weapons. They lost 70 rifles. They'd hired out 2 big Granada cars, and the ass was trailing the road, but they were being watched all along anyway. So they were.
Right.
So, but again, I think that's agencies overlapping. One agency, I think that was a special branch operation, not an MI5. You got to remember, these agencies don't always work hand in hand.
Yeah, because that's obvious. If that's the case, then
yeah. Plus, there would be jealousies too.
Wow.
Yourself, you only have to look at worldwide. Agencies now they all come together for the common good. But if you can make a big arrest, aren't you?
Yeah,
you're king of the jungle.
In your cap. Yeah.
So the UDA was always heavily infiltrated by the special branch, and I think they just moved. But I don't think they realised how much they were going to get. And I don't think the UDA realised what their share was, because they only hired 2 cars.
What, isn't that interesting? I know. Wow.
But anyway, we got disclosure there on that. And they were brought... There was a fella actually admitted doing it. He's done time for it. And he brought them to where he thought the farm was, that the guns were at. He knew this fella's from Belfast. He had no fucking clue where he was. But he knew the pub. He met them in Tandragee, and it was outside Tandragee. And everyone thinks it's the Glenanne farm, but it's too far away.
Yeah.
So there was another prominent loyalist who owned a farm around there, Anyway, he drove one of the cars in, and came in, and they had a slurry tanker converted.
Right.
It lifted up at the back and all the stuff. And he said, there's no way with. The rocket launchers, grenades, just weighty stuff, and a Granada car. I know they're a big car, but
yeah,
the ass was straight on the road and come by Mahon Road Police Station,
Well, it stands the reason your summation would stand the reason that they didn't realise exactly what they were going to get, otherwise they would have prepared better.
They had no idea.
Wow, that's amazing. So those guns those guns were then. So they lost them guns right away. But
the UVF lost half their share about a month later, up somewhere around North Belfast. So
they lost theirs as well.
They lost half their share.
Right.
So they did. But
what did they do to lose their share?
I'd say a rat as well. They were found in an outhouse.
Right. Okay.
I'd say it was. Listen, especially in Belfast, they're competing with each other to be the big, to keep themselves out of jail. That's the way found out in jail. That's what we found out. In the Crum, with the Loyalists, they were ratting each other.
Really?
Unreal. Jesus. I think at one time they said out of one unit, there's only 2 out of 2 of them weren't informers.
I think I read that was 2 out of 200.
Yeah, who weren't.
Yeah, who weren't informers. That's unbelievable.
Again, it would have been, you could be an informant to an ordinary seaman or an ordinary detective, and he could, like John T. Brown. I know you've probably heard of him. He took Johnny Adair down, and Johnny wouldn't be the worst, to be honest. And he would be passing information from his informers, and nothing happening, because it'd probably been getting a higher up informer arrested.
Yes, yeah, of course, yeah.
So I don't know. It's mad. If you could write a book about it, you wouldn't believe it. You put it in fiction, so you wouldn't.
But that's where the Troubles got their the subtitle. Let's call it that. The Dirty War.
Oh yeah.
Because of all that interlocking shite that was going on.
And again, I'd say a lot of it would have been interagency fucking rivalries.
Yes.
So it would have been, I know the likes of some of the Loyalist arrests probably shouldn't have happened because they were probably agents themselves, but another agency wanted to big themselves up, or I don't know, but if I know if I was a Loyalist, I'd been expecting not to go to jail. A lot of them would, they'd be protected. A lot of them weren't, you know what I mean? But most of them, the higher up ones, would have knew they were being protected.
Yeah, of course. Well, yeah, of course they were, because unless
you're actually caught on the job, and very few of the bigger names would have went in the jobs. But to us, Oliver, we think everything he done, he was getting away. He knew he was getting away with it.
So Oliver, Oliver is the murderer of your parents, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So where are you right now with all of that?
Well, we have a civil, right? As I say, we got an inquest from Mummy and Daddy, right? There was 50 legacy inquests, what they call legacy inquests, and who had never had inquests. And before Keegan, I can remember Morgan, the Lord Chief Justice Morgan, he said, right, these are going ahead, find the money, don't care. The Exchequer refused to pay for it. They said, no, it has to come out of the Northern Ireland budget, Arlene Foster refused to release the money. She said, no way, we're not releasing money for something else. We need it for RHI or something. I don't know what she was looking for. But she said, no, we're not releasing it. So a couple of families took her to court, and the judge said, release the money. This is the order, release the money. She still refused to release it till the very, very last minute of the last day. So it was released. So then he set out a 5-year plan. Now, some of the inquests are simple inquests. I hate to call them simple inquests, but they're single-person inquests from the 70s where the army has shot somebody in controversial circumstances, or, they're not, there could be a 2-week, might even last 2 weeks.
Yeah.
So they're handy enough. So they were given to county court judges. These are all judge-led, they're not coroner-led, but the judge is acting as a coroner. So the more complex cases are being given to high court judges. And they're taking longer. The likes of the Lochgall one. There's some very big ones coming up. What do you call lengthy ones? Ballymurphy was one of the lengthier ones. It was one of the big ones. And Keegan wanted to do that one herself, so she did. She asked for that one. So she's assigned judges who competent. My best way of describing them. The 3 or 4 high court judges who are assigned to them are that know the crack. So we're now in year 2. So there's been maybe a dozen has been done so far, another 38 to go, and we're in year 3. So at the start of next year, the new court year starts in August. So between August and June next year, our case will be going ahead, and Kevin McKierney's case will be going ahead, and 4 or 5 others. Wow. And so that's why we're getting disclosure now. Up until then, they never handed a piece of paper over because they didn't have to. They weren't under any pressure.
Wow.
So even in Mummy Daddy's case, we still have not got a word on a piece of paper of official police. Nothing.
Really?
Yeah, we've got Kevin McKierney's, my brother-in-law's not so long ago, and it's very interesting reading. That's only the non-sensitive stuff, so the sensitive stuff, but it'll be heavily redacted, but you'll be able to read between the lines and some of it too,
Yeah, if you had the level of knowledge that someone like you has, you'd be able to.
Yeah, if you look at the Sean Graham report by the Ombudsman, like someone give me the cipher who A, B, C, D, and E is, because they know, and you can work it out. It makes sense then, So I'll be able to work a lot of it out. And to be fair to HET, when they give us our HET report, it's only suspect A, B, C, and D. And they told, someone said they told me who it was, That's all I can say, who A, B, C, and D was. Now, I don't know if that's true or not, but anyway, that's all I can say on that.
No, fair enough.
And a lot of them would have knew, like, I knew most of it, but it wasn't hard to work out, and it makes sense. So it does,
So,
sorry. That's the inquest. Now we have civil cases as well. We're suing the RUC for malfeasance in the public office because they obviously protected their agents. We're suing the MOD for running their agent, who was Alan Oliver, and we're suing Alan Oliver. So, like the Sean Brown case yesterday, they'll bring us to the door of the court, and then it's not about money for us. That's what I want to say straight off.
Of course.
The only way you can get them into court is a civil case, and that's about money.
Yeah, I understand that.
And it's never about money. I wouldn't give a shit. We never applied for compensation. We never asked for it.
No.
So, and I think my sister got something like 20,000 or something. Kevin was killed. That's for loss of earnings for the rest of his life.
Yeah.
So anyway, that was way back in whatever 92, 93. So we now have them in civil, and civil case, civil case is less evidence. You have to prove something like the almost civil case. They're fit to prove or say who done what they did, but without actually having any admissions or anything. It wouldn't stand up in a criminal court, but it'll stand up in a civil court.
Yeah.
So we have. So they've started to give disclosure again on Kevin McKerney's case, and the law used to be that if you get something in a civil case, you can't use it in a criminal or an inquest. But Keegan overrid that. She said, listen, why duplicate paperwork? If you find something out in the civil case, it can be used in the...
Does the civil case come first?
Not really. A civil case goes the way it goes. It's getting listed for a civil case. The Master of the Rolls it's all about dates.
Oh.
So it is. We just happen to have a civil case and an inquest going at the same time.
Oh, really? And which is likely to come to his conclusion first?
I think. Well, I guess Kevin, my brother-in-law's is up here in June.
Right.
So it is. So again, they'll go to the door of the court. They don't want us calling Oliver to the stand like he'll be called if we have to call him. They don't want us calling his handlers. They don't want that.
Right.
They don't, and they can do that all they want, but the judge will say, he'll ask, whoever the judge is, he'll say, listen, get him here.
So, sorry, Paddy, let me get, so you're taking him to court in a civil case, and you're going to be in that courtroom with him, and you're going to try to get him to take the stand?
Yeah. Oh, if we can get him to take the stand, absolutely, yeah. He'll be called, yeah.
And he'll be called, so...
No, he can say nothing. Well, I guess he hasn't.
Right, okay.
There was a writ issued on him 4 or 5 years ago, and he hasn't responded to it.
Right.
Now, the MOD and the police and I can't remember who were still half the time, but they have responded, so they have, and they're defending it, but it'll only go so far.
Yeah.
Like they've had to try to throw it out 2 or 3 times, but the judge saying there's a case here to be heard,
Yeah.
So it'll be like Sean Brown yesterday, who was killed in Balahi, remember the GA fella? Uh-huh. His widow was trying from, I don't know how long the civil case had run, but they brought her right to the court, and then 5 minutes later, they made her go to court with all her family, and 5 minutes then they made her an offer,
Wow.
Whereas in the likes of, I'm friendly with Stephen Travers from the Miami show band, one of the Glenanne gang, and they offered him a derisory sum, and he said, "No, I'm going to court." But this is where the civil case gets tricky. If you're offered what they think is a decent amount, and you go to court, and the judge looks at it and says, "Well, hold on, you're offered whatever, a couple $100,000, and you didn't accept it," he can then make you pay their legal bill. Now, if it's derisory amount, he can go, "No." But they'd offered Stephen, I don't know what time what they offered, but it wasn't, he went not a chance. And it wasn't about money again, he wanted to go into court. Then when they offered him the big amount, the barrister said, listen, this can come back on you.
Right.
And that's all cases, Any case that actually goes into the... Well, I guess, when's the last time you heard of a civil case involving the North going into court?
Yeah.
Doesn't happen. Because they're smart enough to know that the only reason you'd go into court is to have your day in court. Yes. And not give a shit. But it'll cost you.
Yes.
And whatever. And so
unless you're wealthy, you're not going to be able to do that.
No, not a chance. No. Listen, every time we go to court, we've one barrister and they have 10.
Oh, Christ almighty.
So, listen, they have legions of barristers on demand.
Sorry, Paddy. If you end up, you are going to end up in this civil case with your man, Oliver, will he have an army of barristers beside him?
We think the state will indemnify him, which means they'll take him under the wing.
See,
they'll say, listen, we're all being sued, and Ron put him out of pocket. We don't know. See, it's not in, but listen, I don't think it'll go that far. It might, I don't know. Listen, I don't know, but I think they want this out of the way.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I think, and that's why Johnson's bringing this law in too, because he's sick of it.
Yeah, yeah. Wow. My
It's not
God.
about money. It's not about money for them. Like, they have barristers on top. You know what I mean? They're getting paid
Oh
anyway.
yeah.
They might as well get paid to do something.
Oh yeah, 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 yeah.
So now the inquest is different. It's going to head now. It will be like a mini public inquiry on what we're going to. Well, I'm not actually what we're going to do. I'm not.
No,
But
no.
this is more than one. This is more about mummy and daddy being killed. This is what we'd call systemic. You know,
Yes, yes.
it's not just what it's. You can't help but say there's a pattern,
Aye.
and so the likes of the Cairnses and all those families, they're as relevant to our inquest as anyone.
Mm-hmm.
Same people. Listen, if there's any other country in the world you're going where a handful of people with the same guns going around shooting people, you'd say, well, there's a pattern here, like.
Well, if there's any other country in the United Kingdom.
Oh, I know. Jeez, imagine.
You know what I mean? Just right back to your point at the very beginning, this doesn't happen anywhere else.
No, it doesn't. It doesn't. No matter if Thatcher said it, we're as British as Finchley as we're not, like.
And some people still believe that.
The thing about it is the unions have they're that desperate to be seen as British. They're happy enough to let the state go in and kill. They're sitting now. They've killed Protestants too, like, so they have, but they're happy enough that the state wouldn't do that.
Yeah.
Like if Doug Beattie is any good, you'd go, listen, there was wrong done. Get out in the open. Instead of blindly saying no, there was never any wrong done. The state never does any wrong.
Yeah, exactly, and that's a part of my thing with this podcast is I try to tell people about the nature of empire and colonialism, and that we have been colonised, and that's what's going on this island, and that the British state is the same thing that you see repeated all around the world was done here, and is still being done here, and I try to explain that on my podcast a lot, and just on that, can I ask you? I don't know if this is too simple. If it is, please forgive me. But you know how South Africa had their Truth and Reconciliation Commission?
Mm-hmm.
Would that have been something that would have been a good thing for here, you think?
No, because in South Africa, they had access to the government files. Here, we would be... you couldn't imagine any of the higher-ups in MI5 coming and say, yeah, we done this. At least in South Africa, they had access... They come out the winners. So they'd access to all their files, even if some of them were born, they're still new enough. Whereas here, you not, it'll go a bit, and some handler will take the fall. But you're not going to say this was a brainchild of somebody in Whitehall. They'll never admit that.
Yeah, because they're still in office.
Or even if they're not, it would mean the state had a policy of killing its own citizens, and they'll never admit that. They can't admit that. So look how long it took them to say Bloody Sunday, which was blatant, and then it happened, but they're saying it was a few bad soldiers,
Yeah.
Rather than... I don't know if you read that in the Village magazine recently about the man Wilfred meeting Soldier F and Soldier G the night before Bloody Sunday. They were asked to go to a church. I'll send the article. The Village magazine's fantastic.
Yeah.
But those two, they were total psychos. They were seen. They were trying to provoke the area into a gunfight.
Yeah. Yes, I did read something about, and one of them was actually killed in South Africa.
Yeah. That's all coming out now. You know what I mean? But they're never going to admit that. They're never going to get Wilfred, who's still alive, to admit, and then told the boys to shoot away.
Yeah, of course they're not. No.
So that's why the South African thing would be very one-sided. You'd have Billy from the Shankill Road admitting that he shot such and such without knowing who told him it or why. They'll do what they're told. You know what I mean? It'll just be, all you do is demonize people. I have no, what the Loyalists done, they done, but it's why they done it.
It's context.
The lawless kill Catholics. You know what I mean? That's just in their nature. But it's when it's stepped up a level and becomes policy.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? That's like turn. And Catholics too. Don't get me wrong. Like, you know, there's Catholics hate Protestants. You know, and they do. Like,
Yeah.
but it's. I think when the state knows they have willing executioners, like it's the best way to describe them, and they can exploit them
Yeah.
for their own. And was this? I firmly believe this was a reaction to the Gaddafi guns coming in. I think it scared. I think they went holy. At the very first shipment was got up in Donegal in '86. And at that
Yeah.
stage, they were saying that they had Libyan arms forces stamped all over the boxes. But they were saying at the time was speculated that they were bought from a Belgian gun dealer who dealt with the Libyans.
Yeah.
And then they realised very shortly after, hold on the fuck, there's bunkers all over the country.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
That's amazing.
So, and you know, it scared them.
Yeah. Yeah. Because as you said earlier on, there was a genuine fear of there was going to be a civil war.
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
Because that's what, because there was that amount of weaponry.
Mm-hmm. Well, I'd say they're probably more worried about the IRA's guns that they could up the ante.
Aye.
If you're sitting with surface-to-air missiles, it's a big game changer.
Fuck, I'd say so.
No, I'm talking about from the British point of view, like, you know.
Yeah, yeah.
From a handful of weapons smuggled in from America, you know, warm lights and stuff, to fucking, you know, heavy machine guns, mortars, you know, that's a game changer, you know.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. That's
my belief. And how do you break Tyrone?
Yeah.
You send in the Loyalists.
Yeah.
It worked in the 70s, you know what I mean? It detracted the IRA from what they were trying to do, you know, what they were doing at the time, like.
Well, whenever I talk with, I'm a musician and I travel the world, and people always ask me about the North and what went on here, and I always say I still believe that the people that live through the Troubles, we all suffer still from a collective trauma that's never been dealt with, and like, you know how people get PTSD, but even if you aren't directly affected by someone like you have been, lost someone directly so close to you, even just living through that as you point out, that sense of fear, living in that becomes so normalized. Then when you come out of it, it wasn't dealt with. It was never dealt with for anyone.
And people, listen, I'm in the South a lot, and people don't believe you.
Yes.
No, I'm talking about my case. I'm talking about, like, it wasn't that bad. You know what I mean? Like, because they are obviously brainwashed too with the media were saying, "Oh, the big bad North," you know.
Yeah, yeah.
And they wouldn't. Like, honest to God, if you try to tell, I talk to my sons, they wouldn't believe some of the stuff that we've been through. You know what I mean? You can get stopped, and you know all that nonsense. You know what I mean? Jesus.
Exactly, and it became so normalized. But
didn't it? I know. You'd see a checkpoint, and you'd, oh God, you know what I mean? Like, and you just, it did become normalized, like, you know, it did. And
I remember showing a friend of mine. I used to be in a bit of photography and stuff, and there was the Brits were up at town here in Lurgan, and they were just they're just an army patrol going through the middle of the town, which is so perfectly normal. And I took a photo. You're not supposed to take. I took a wee photograph, and sent it over to my friend in England. He didn't believe me. He's like, what is that? I said, that's my high street. And there was a child sitting beside the Land Rover eating an ice lolly. It was a beautiful summer's day. And he didn't believe it. He was like, that can't be real. So that's nothing.
That's not. Can you imagine it was like in the 70s, for fuck's sake?
Oh, unbelievable.
I know.
Unbelievable.
Well, I know. I try and keep my sons away from it, you know. I've just said, like, it's and my belief is it went on too long. It should have been ended in the 70s, you know.
Yeah.
Like, it became past 76. It just became a battle of attrition, you know, and no one wins that.
Yeah.
Like, you know, I'm a Republican, but like looking back and it's going, the Republicans were in talks in 72 and 75 with the British government, and they did want to sort something out.
So why do you think it dragged on so long?
Because no one could see a way out.
Right.
we were led to believe you could blow them out, you could blow them back to England, and that was basically it. And the Brits just had a war. They said we can absorb it, and they did. It became you've heard it before, an acceptable level of violence.
Yeah, yeah.
And it did. Listen, you tell me the difference between 1984, 85, 86, and the North 87. Every year was the same.
Yeah.
And there was no attempt to stop it.
Yeah.
I guess I said to someone, I remember having a row with a fella in the South. He's talking about Joe Duffy writing this book about the children of the North.
Yeah.
And he said, oh, good for Joe. I said, fuck Joe. I said, what did Joe Duffy ever do to stop the war? Even if he had went to the Sinn Féin office and said, that's wrong what you're doing, he didn't. None of them did nothing. They stood idly by.
Yeah.
And that's my biggest argument with him in the South. I said, I don't care if he's helped Republicans when he didn't, but he didn't. He stood idly by and didn't even try and stop it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And they're all going, we didn't know how. I said, well, fucking hell. You had people campaigning in the UK, anti-CND, they knew what to do. You go and you protest.
Yeah.
And that's my biggest, hope there's nobody from the South listening to this, but that's my biggest argument with the people from the South.
Yeah.
They went along with it, and it was just actually they're all mad up there, all nonsense. Like they could have stopped it if they could have tried. They didn't even try.
It still breaks my heart whenever I hear a Southern accent, sort of poo-pooing United Ireland.
Bono. Bono. Do you hear? Was it what he said to Bon Jovi about how he lived through the trouble?
He lived through the troubles. And where was he?
South Armagh, I think it was.
Bono from South Armagh.
So there's a great meme, or someone doctored a photograph of private IRA men in the back of a truck with having machine guns, and Bono sitting there, with it. I'll send it to you. It's the funniest thing,
fucking pox, he really is. He's starting up in Ukraine now.
That's the best one I saw was, please, have they not suffered enough?
Have they not suffered enough? Honest to God, oh, you fucking just stop it, man. He's they're unbelievable.
Him and Geldof, you know what I mean? Fuck that.
I used to love him. Have you ever read his book?
Geldof, no. I hate him too much.
Well, it was when he still had the run of himself. He wrote an autobiography. I think it was... Is That It? I think it's called Is That It? I'm not sure. But he wrote an autobiography, and it was a page turner. Absolutely brilliant.
Seriously, I'd say in the 70s he had a very interesting life. So
yeah. Oh, he was. I read it. It was the book. I'm talking 20 years ago. It was brilliant. It was absolutely brilliant. And I went to see the Boomtown Rats in the Ulster Hall there a few years ago with my mate Pete, who's an old Belfast punk, and they were fantastic. But since then he's just lost.
Was he with them?
He played with the Boomtown Rats, yeah.
No, but was he with them in the concert in Belfast? Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, fuck, I thought he had fell out with them. I didn't know he's still with them.
He had, but he got back. They did a tour. I think they're all friends again now. I don't know if they're still out on the road anymore, but they definitely did a tour, and they were absolutely brilliant. He was class, still brilliant performer. But I was just like, hey, what the fuck's wrong with you, man?
I don't know. I thought that they were playing. I genuinely thought he had fell out to them. Seems Sharky, I didn't think. Because we went to see Undertones in Belfast a couple of times, and Sharky wasn't with them, and they were fantastic. They were just they didn't need him.
No, but they were. Well, the Rats were absolutely. I mean, I was a fan of the Rats.
Oh yes, so was I. Listen, Jesus, it's like some of their stuff, but it's just he turned into a prick,
He really did. He really fucking did. It's unbelievable. Well, here, Paddy, listen, I'm going to call that, because that's going to be a great. I cannot thank you enough for taking the time out to talk to me and tell your story to my listeners.
Okay, no problem. Anytime, Andy. So keep in touch.
Absolutely. And I was going to say, you've got an open invitation here. So if you ever, if you any developments, or you want to come on and update us all with what's going on, you're more than welcome. Just let me know and we can arrange it really quickly.
Well, Andy, for your own personal point of view, I'll send you a few documents, supporting documents I've talked about. And you'll see yourself, and this is the states giving me, so like they're...
Yeah.
It's not as if we're inventing them, So
No. Oh, absolutely.
They're being given So I'm telling you, like there's nothing insensitive. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, fair enough. No, and as I said, I mean, it's the level of this collusion that it's genuinely took my breath away. We all knew it existed, but I
Yeah.
don't think any of us realised just exactly
But
what extent.
Lurgan got very badly hit, so it did.
We did,
Lurgan,
yeah. Oh, it was
didn't it? Like,
terrible. That was very bad. We got it, as you say. I mean, well, it was shocking. It was really
yeah,
bad. I grew up around it just like everybody else, and not saying that I suffered any more than anyone else. I didn't,
yeah.
but thank God I was actually remained relatively untouched. But yeah, it was again. It's that you lived in it. You were aware of it. You had to you checked your behaviour in order to not become a victim, and you lived in that normality.
I know.
You know.
I know. Sure, listen, we could talk all night about it.
Oh, seriously. And we'll talk again.
Right,
Listen,
no more.
Paddy, thanks so much. Stay on the line there just for a wee second after
Yeah,
I press,
no problem. Yeah, work away.
I press the stop button so that the file uploads. Everybody, thank you so much thanks to Paddy for taking the time. Actually, I'll just do this post. I'll just do this wee thank you post. And then whenever I have this done, I'll send you a link, okay?
Okay, no problem. Cheers, thanks.
Right. So there we go. Wow, what about that? Thank you, Paddy, again for coming on, so graciously giving me your time and all that information. It's just absolutely staggering. It is literally blowing my mind. The amount of collusion that's coming out. It should be a real game changer for us here in the north. Another reason why we need to reunify this island. We need to be away from these cycles over there, and that's my opinion. Yeah, so my heart goes out to all the families and all the victims of those monsters, and I just hope that everybody, I'm not going to say gets satisfaction because it'll never happen really, but gets a little bit of closure for this. That would be great. I think that's the most anyone can hope for, really. So that's it. Listen, this podcast is going to be going out early to my patrons. If you want to get early access to my content, please head over to Patreon. It's only £3 a month. You get extra content, bonus episodes, little audio documentary things that I do from time to time, and it helps me keep the lights on over here at Politics, Culture and Some Other Shit. So thanks again. Thanks everybody. And Monday night and maybe Thursday night this week, I'm going to be doing live streams on YouTube, so you can join me there. We're just talking about the general politics of the day. Okay, toodle pip everyone, bye.